Night like young lovers do. Your heart is changing. Now we don't dance like we used to. Silent disco on the floor, baby. Mr. DJ, he'll get me through. When the beat's gone, you can't save me, baby. Smoke and mirrors, pretty lights. Another runaway city boy getting too high. But boys like you tell pretty lies. The 5 a.m. low in your eyes says your heart is changing. Now we don't dance like we used to. Silent disco on the floor, baby. Mr. DJ, you'll get me through.
This is Broad Radio. For you, by you. Broad Radio. Here for more.
Good morning and welcome to Broad Radio. I'm Jo Stanley and I'm thrilled that my co-host today is Serpil Senelmis. Hi there, Serpil.
Hello, Jo.
I tell you what, there's nothing like starting a day and a show with complete admission that of epic failure on our path. Oh my gosh, I don't know what goes on for us, and I'm saying us. There's a team of me and some amazing people that work on creating Broad Radio, but we were to be joined, our third guest today, Nat Dann, who's an incredible Indigenous fashion designer. She's in WA. And every time we have a guest joining us from WA, somehow we forget to tick the box that says, hey, there is a time difference.
There is. It's 2 hours now and it will be 3 hours shortly.
Every time. And so I don't know that Nat Dann's going to be joining us today.
Hopefully she'll wake up, look at her emails and go, oh, I'll join.
Hopefully she will. Hopefully she doesn't wake up like in 4 hours' time going, oh, no, I let them down. It's not your fault, Nat Dann, and we will get you on the show another time because she has just had her beautiful swimwear walk the catwalk at New York Fashion Week, which is extraordinary. Amazing. Yeah, so we will talk to Nat Dann another time, or perhaps this morning. You never know. But that's okay because we do have two incredible guests that I'm very excited about today. We have Emma Murray, who is a peak performance and mindfulness coach, and I will tell you is honestly one of the most amazing women that I've ever worked with. It was transformative, the time that I spent with Emma. And then also we're going to be joined by Dr. Sian Prior, who is one of my favourite writers. I'm basically just fangirling today.
You are. It's pretty exciting. I love the juicy topics we're going to get into.
Yeah, it's a lot about resilience. Yeah. Yes, which I think we all need. If you are listening, watching live, we would love it if you shared your comments or questions along the way. We love having you join us. And if you are catching up on any of our episodes via our podcast, Broad Radio on the Go, we would love it if you would share it, rate it, like, subscribe, all of those things that help in this mad world of connection in which we're all vying for attention, basically. Speaking of which, have you, Serpil, connected with this endless, I was going to say ridiculous, that might be unkind for people who are mourning the loss of the Queen, but the last week of pomp and ceremony?
I've dipped in and out of it. So I haven't been glued to the television or the radio like some people. I mean, it's a big historic moment, so you don't want to miss out on the moment, I suppose. I spoke to my sister in the UK, and so she gave me a pretty good rundown of, you know, what's happening in London on the ground. So she actually her and the kids went out to London, and she said it took forever to get into London Central, hours, and it felt like the entire city had been turned into a flower garden because there was just flowers everywhere.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah. So she said she felt like, it was a massive occasion that would be a once in a lifetime experience. I mean, you know, in terms of thinking around the monarchy, I'm not a monarchist, but you know, I get that there's a place to mourn the Queen, but I also think that the monarchy in 2022 is a little bit problematic, Joe.
Absolutely.
I think that, you know, the time of kings and queens, I would have thought would have been sort of over by 2022. I also think in a country like ours, you need to be very nuanced and mindful about how we have the conversations around the monarchy, because we still haven't resolved a lot of things around our Indigenous community. And, you know, it is painful to be having these conversations for the Indigenous community. So I think we need to be quite nuanced about how we approach this topic, I suppose. Yeah.
And the occasion and whatever that represents. I feel, and I absolutely agree with what you're saying there, but I also acknowledge that you can be affected by the loss of someone who's very, very famous. Like if we have connection with something and someone and whatever they represent, a lot of people I've spoken to have said, well, she kind of represented my nana for me or my grandma, and so there's sort of a sense of loss there. So I acknowledge that you can be saddened by that, and you know, that's entirely fair enough. I did not watch the funeral, but I have to say there was one thing that I did see. I don't know how it popped up in my feed, which was Senator Holly Hughes on Sky News, saying the most horrific things about Harry and Meghan. And I just hope now that this funeral is done, that they can go back to their lives and not be just the subject of the most appalling vitriol based on nothing. This woman, Senator Holly Hughes, she says about Meghan, I think she's had a terrible influence over him. She's just a horrible human. They're awful, revolting people. She's never met them. How can you judge someone based on made-up headlines, made-up stories? I cannot fathom how you can be so cruel and say something so publicly, and that we tolerate this.
I think it's become a bit of a sport, and I think if a person represents something that you're against, it becomes fair game. So if Meghan Markle is trying to criticise the monarchy and you're a staunch monarchist, let's just say, then it becomes fair game for that person to criticise them, and it's cruel because at the end of the day, what do you achieve out of criticising someone, like you said, that you've never met? And you know, I'm sure you've experienced lots of criticism in your public profile role that has impacted you.
Well, I wouldn't say that I have. I mean, I was never really, trust me, no one really cares enough about me to criticise me that much, I think. But I have witnessed it. I've witnessed people make comments about celebrities that I've met. And I was like, well, I think you're talking rubbish because you don't know that person. I actually find it irresponsible. And we non-stop talk in the media now about how we want to destigmatise mental illness and suicide ideation, and how we really want to support people and whatever they're dealing to become, you know, healthy and well. And yet we sanction that kind of conversation, which we know actually that Meghan has. She has had extreme reaction to the kind of abuse that she's had. And we saw Harry recently in an interview said that that she confessed to him that she had suicide ideation. So even aside from her as an individual, that now becomes we tolerate this conversation in society, and that pervades how we treat other people.
So what do you think has brought us to this point, Joe? Is it social media, or is it the need for attention? Because I feel like, I mean, were we always this unkind, or is this a new phenomenon? Because, you know, we constantly are bombarded by ganging up on a particular individual or unloading on a particular individual. And, you know, today it might be Meghan Markle, but flick on the news tomorrow, I guarantee you it will be someone else filling in her shoes. And I don't know what it is. And is it just simply because news outlets need to sell stories? It's click-worthy. It's just clickbait. Is that what it is? Or is it people who want their 5 minutes of fame, and so they're saying something that's outrageous so that it throws the spotlight on them, like Senator Holly Hughes?
Potentially it's both. I think people do like being controversial because they know they get column inches. I also think that as a community we like having a common enemy, like it binds us somehow. And for some reason, that's been the narrative in the royal family for decades. Obviously, we saw it with Diana and Fergie. So I don't know if there's something around, if there was someone who's done some sort of sociology study on tribalism and why we need to actually be so, like, it's like kicking out the reject from the pack in a way.
Yeah.
You know, why would we do that? But it just is so irresponsible, and it appalls me that the media, on one hand, are you okay days all over the place, and then on the other, it's all right to say all this horrible stuff about someone.
Yeah.
Kindness is the only thing that's actually going to really address our terrible situation with mental illness, I think.
Absolutely. I think, empathy has to be what binds us all together.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell you, I did have empathy though. One last little thing on the funeral for the Queen. I did have a great deal of empathy for the private family, because their final commitment finished at 4:30 a.m.
Oh, must have been a long day for them.
Can you imagine? They took the Queen back to St George's Chapel for that private committal service. 4:30 a.m. that finished, which, wow.
And we also forget that, they're public figures, but they've just lost a loved one.
Yeah.
And, you would want 5 minutes to grieve your loved one alone and have that alone time like any other normal family. But they don't get to experience that normality, which, you have to feel for them from that regard.
I do, absolutely. Well, I'm super excited to welcome a woman who, when it comes to mental health, she's got a lot to say herself. She's got an incredibly broad experience around all of the wonderful tools that we can access to get through life. And I must say that the times I've had in deep conversation with this woman have been transformative for me. So I'm thrilled to welcome peak performance and mindfulness coach. She is that to some of Australia's top athletes and some not so famous people as well. Emma Murray, welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me. So listening intently to your opening conversation, then wanting to butt in and.
Well, what's your perspective? Because I know that you have a really beautiful insight into the way our minds work, and instinct and all that sort of stuff. What's your perspective on why do people wish to demonise members of our community in that way?
I mean, I can't answer that, but I think what's happening for a lot of people is we don't feel great in us. And, life's tough. It's a grind. We get to the end of the day and we don't feel great. And somehow across the years, we have made it okay to have a say about famous people. And so it's like we vomit our feelings onto this fair game. And, you talked about kindness being the only way forward. I really think we have to start being a little bit kinder to ourselves and being able to sort our own stuff out rather than, dealing with it by letting it build up, and then we just vomit it onto other people. The thing that really gets me is going to like the football and watching people, how they speak at the players, about the players, the umpires. It's horrific. Like it's not even, like it's mind-blowing sometimes that they can let themselves be in such an unhealthy, state, emotional state, and that their way to deal with that is to go to the football and just, put this onto other people like it's fair game. Yeah. And I try and look at those people with empathy and go, what's going on for you that you feel the need to do that? So I do think we have to sort ourselves out a little bit if we want to make any headroads into it.
Emma, on that, I believe like one of the things that you do is when you're working with people to help them bring their A game, you work with them around emotional regulation. What are some of the red flags that you're looking for, and how can we get better at emotional regulation so we're not hurling abuse at, you know, the umpire or the football players or our office
children.
colleague?
No, seriously, our children, I think the biggest red flag, the thing that is really going on for most people, is just a complete lack of self-awareness. And if we don't have self-awareness, I say, if, you know, I talk about this concept of having an A game and a B game, and our B games, and we're stuck on all of that stuff that's out of our control. You know, Meghan Markle is out of our control. How she lives, what she does, who she is out of our control. When we get stuck on that stuff, you know, whether it's our boss, the deadlines, you know, what our kids are or aren't doing, you know, what the neighbours doing, what the politicians are doing. When we get stuck on that stuff, it shows up for each of us very differently. For some people, it shows up, you know, going to the football and abusing the umpires or yelling at our kids. For other people, it shows up going really quiet, retreating, removing yourself from life. It shows up very differently. But if we cannot catch that in ourselves, then we can't start to control it and refocus it and shift it and change it. So my biggest red flag is, you know, people that have zero self-awareness of that. And, you know, I mean, that comment, Joe, that you just said about what the journalist said about Meghan, that is horrific. Like, how you cannot have self-awareness around what I'm saying, what I'm doing to another person, what I'm feeling, and what's behind that. That's the problem, that we just have zero awareness. So, you know, and it's a difficult one to teach, but it has to start there.
Well, it starts with recognising even the physical signs, I suppose. Okay, I know that if I am, you know, outside that window of tolerance, and I've been, you know, really reached the end of my tether, I know that I start to get, you know, sort of sweaty, and I, like, whatever it might be, my voice starts getting really fractious, or, you know, I guess we have to train ourselves to recognise those things in ourselves, right?
Yeah, that's right. We talk about that every thought has a feeling attached to it, and these thoughts and feelings, they dictate our actions, our behaviours. So every behaviour, every habitual behaviour, and that's the point that we need to understand, these responses in us are habitual. I'm not going to go to the football and yell at an umpire, but these people have probably gone every Friday, whether it's at the television or at the ground, they've done that same behaviour. It's very habitual. And so it's really understanding behind that habitual response, and yelling at our kids is a big one. There is a certain feeling attached to that and a certain thought attached. It's really tough to catch that thought. It's a lot easier to catch that feeling, you know, whether it's that anger, it's the tight shoulders. And when I use that feeling, try and think of that as physiology as well. So that might be my voice goes really high, or it goes really loud, or, you know, my posture gets very, very tense, or very small, or very big. I stand over people. So it's trying to catch that physiology and that feeling. And that's the moment where we catch it, that we need to put a strategy in place. Like, I walk away, or I take 3 breaths, or I repeat a mantra to myself to try and interrupt that habitual response that many of us have been playing for years and years. It just goes without us thinking about it.
One of the things that, you know, you say that helps is mindfulness. Why is it important to focus on the here and now, not the past, not the future? Why does it pay to sharpen that tool?
Yeah, you know, when I learned mindfulness, I learned it very traditionally, you know, monks and people who had learnt off monks. And I remember I was at a retreat, and, you know, someone very experienced in mindfulness said to me, Emma, there is no struggle in the present moment. The struggle sits outside of the present moment. And I sort of got that. I thought about that, but that really hit home to me when, for those that know my story, my son, he's 20 years old now, but when he was 14, he jumped from a pier and broke his neck. He became quadriplegic, sustained a spinal cord injury. And I remember when he was in hospital. And I really thought about that saying, there's no struggle in the present, there's no struggle in the present moment. I really thought about, well, how can you say that? I'm about to walk into a hospital room, my son's lying in a bed, he can't move anything or feel anything from the chest and shoulders down. But when I really thought about that, I thought about the struggle is not walking into a room and talking to my son. The struggle is in me thinking about our future, and he'll never walk again, and he'll never do this, and he won't do that. Or the struggle is in me going, why did I let him go to the beach? Why wasn't I there? Why did it have to be so shallow that day? Just walking in the present moment, all I was doing was walking into a room and having a conversation with my son. So in the present moment, there is no struggle for us. It's all the stories around that present moment. So if we can spend more time just in the present moment, right here, right now, you and I, we're moving our mouths, we're moving our lips, we're, having a conversation. It's when we attach all that other stuff to it where the struggle comes in. So just trying to come back into right here, right now. That's a saying that I've used a lot since Will's accident. Right here, right now, all I'm doing is this. That's it, nothing else.
So, and what is it about us, though, that we have those worry thoughts? I mean, there's a reason for them, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah.
I say that because you've taught me this. I know. I curse this reason every day, but no, this reason is very important. This reason keeps us alive. We are human, and we have, our human wiring, our mind-body connection is wired purely for survival. I think everyone needs to understand that our wiring is not to make us great at our jobs or great parents or a great friend or, really good at emotional regulation. Our wiring is just purely so we can stay one step ahead of threats that could potentially end our lives. So it's important that we have this wiring, but it brings us unstuck because, back in caveman era, we were trying to stay one step ahead of the threat of, wild animals and starvation and exposure to the weather. But they're not our threats. For most people, they're not our threats anymore. And, and you mentioned, Joe, in the introduction about that tribalism. Our greatest threat as humans in today's world is actually being outs from the tribe. It's disconnection. It's being alone. And so we're constantly going through our day trying to stay one step ahead of what people think of us. Am I doing the wrong thing? What could people not like me for? And so because of that, the strategy that we have created to keep us alive is a very powerful self-critical mind. So it's like this self-critical mind wants to constantly tell us, don't wear that, don't say that. It wants to replay the things that we did that we shouldn't have done. So that it's as if our mind is trying to say, let me protect you from doing anything that could mean that people don't like you and could disconnect from you. And this self-critical mind is wild, and it makes us feel all of these things that then we then go and take it out on our children and Meghan Markle and AFL umpires.
Emma, I also think because of our self-critical minds, we often don't like admitting as a society any performance challenges, whether, it's in a game of sport, whether it's on the job, whether it's running a small business, because no one likes to feel like, well, I'm a bit of a failure, I'm weak, people are going to judge me, they're going to think I'm not good enough. How do we flip that script?
Yeah, I think there's some incredible people, the Resilience Project, for instance, they're getting a lot of messages out there around the power of vulnerability. Brene Brown, a lot of people have heard about her, and we're starting to hear words like authenticity and vulnerability that are really about owning the fact that, I'm not perfect and that's okay. And the funny thing is, I wish we all realised we actually connect through our imperfections. We don't connect through having everything right. I'm certainly not drawn to the mother at school who's got the perfect plate of brownies for the fete, and
I hate that mother
perfectly. want to be friends with the mother who's always late and her kids are slightly dishevelled with you know, their lunchbox, because that's what I relate to. But you know, it's understanding that it's our imperfections that are going to connect us, and being and seeing that as a strength. I do think we are starting to hear that message. We're getting that message sometimes slightly wrong, that vulnerability means I now have to share my deepest, darkest stuff with the world, and I have to outdo you on challenges and struggles. You know, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about in the work environment saying, I don't know the answer to that. I'm stuck on this. I need help with that. It's asking, you know, a mum asking another mum for help with something, or, you know, admitting that you're having a hard time. It doesn't have to be, you know, giving over all my deepest, darkest secrets.
So resilience, obviously, it's a bit of a buzzword. You know, we talk so much about resilience at the moment, as well as mindfulness. It's different from a toxic positivity, which is another kind of buzzword. How do we find that sweet spot where we may have the tool belt for resilience, but also kind of honour the fact that life is hard?
Yeah, you know, I have a saying that I can do hard things. You know, that was a big saying for our family after Will's accident. You know, we can do hard things. I can do hard things. It's, you know, there's a difference between positivity, you know, everything's great, everything's fine, you know, that does breed that toxicity. I think optimism is a really important tool in being able to say that, you know, I'm scared, this is hard, but I'm not trusting everything will be okay. I'm trusting that I will find a way through it. You know, I'm trusting that I can draw on people to help me through it. And this was another thing for Will's accident. You know, for me, we hear the tool gratitude all the time, and I really struggled with that after Will's accident. You know, how gratitude was all of a sudden supposed to make me feel, you know, everything was okay. But what I did really dig into was two tools, which for me, I prefer than using words like resilience. First, I used the tool of acceptance. So really digging into accepting that I can't change the situation, accepting that it's normal to feel the way I was feeling after that what had happened, accepting that, you know, the way people are behaving is out of your control. I think that acceptance has to be our starting point before we get into resilience or gratitude or, you know, anything else. It's like, just accept. And when we talk about acceptance, actually first starting with self-acceptance, accepting that it's okay to be nervous. It's okay to feel tired after a pandemic and everything else we've got on. It's okay to feel like I'm not doing a great job in this mother working role. So acceptance, I think, is really powerful. And if that's not something that you have practiced in your life, really recommend reading up on it more. Tara Brach, B-R-A-C-H, psychologist and mindfulness practitioner who coined the term radical acceptance, where we really have to, you know, I say spinal cord injuries, radical acceptance, accepting something I shouldn't have to or don't want to. So I think acceptance is the gateway to all of the, you know, resilience and everything else. And I also love optimism. You know, optimism is not that positive thinking. It's just thinking, I'm going to find a way. And I don't think you can drop into optimism until you have acceptance with what's going on around you. And when you're really tough, I had a lot of optimism around the people around me. You know, I maybe wasn't sure about my own ability to cope, but I was optimistic that as a community, as a group of people, you know, we were going to be able to get through spinal cord injuries. So, you know, that's when I think of resilience. They're the things I think of.
Emma, I want to circle back to mindfulness, because Joe and I were talking off air earlier about how we've just bombarded with information all the time. You know, you've got your text messages, you've got your inbox, you've got social media. It's just constant chatter, and it's really hard to laser focus on something. I feel like our focus has been stolen. I know that, I apply the Pomodoro method when I'm doing really concentrated bursts of activity and just shut everything out, and I'm so productive. But it's really hard to ignore everything else going on around you. I guess my question is, how do we reclaim our enhanced focus? Are there some tips and tools that we can apply to reclaim it?
Yeah, it's getting harder, isn't it? It's so difficult, and we have to, again, acceptance. We have to accept that that's the world we live in. It's fast. It's really at us the whole time, and I don't believe the answer is saying, okay, get off social media, remove this, remove that, because I think those tools can also play a really important role in connection in today's world. And so it's more setting boundaries and taking a little bit of control back around the noise. So when I'm talking boundaries, a few things that I do, I make sure the feed of information that is coming into me is, any accounts, any feed that doesn't make me feel good, that doesn't help me, I remove, and I make sure that I'm getting a healthy balance of information in that is actually filling me up. And if you're someone that doesn't find a lot of time to read, actually having a great social media feed can really help you get the information that you need. But in saying that, what I do is when I am feeling like I'm getting a little bit noisy in my mind and overwhelmed, I take off social media for a few weeks. So I control it. That comes back to that self-awareness. Okay, I've got the self-awareness that I am spending too much time on this. I am getting pulled too much into this, so I'll just have some time off it. But I think things like having rules around, there's a particular spot in the house when I come home from work, I put my phone there, I connect with the kids before I get back on my phone. I have a time that I put my phone away at night. When I walk the dog, I leave my phone, at home. So just creating boundaries around that noise. And again, accepting, I wish everyone, any of my friends who will listen to this will know this, that I accept that I cannot control how people think of me. I can't control what they feel if I don't respond to their texts, what they feel if I don't get back to them about something. And I don't necessarily reply to everything in the speed of light that everyone else does. And people get really uncomfortable about that. And I'm like, I didn't invite everyone to contact me. I didn't ask for you to contact me. I didn't invite that in. And so I'm not responding to that because it's stealing my focus.
Yeah, that's not you. You chose to contact me.
You chose to contact me. It's not like I didn't sign a contract that I have to respond to you every time you contact me. It's amazing to me how uncomfortable that makes people feel. Yeah. And I would choose my mental health over how you feel about me not responding any day of the week.
I just, that in itself, to give yourself permission to go, I don't need to respond right now. A lot of it, I think, comes down to the self-compassion and acknowledging that you're worthy of those boundaries, that you are entitled to set up that space that keeps you well, which I think a lot of us, we need to practice that a lot, Em.
Yeah. And, I was having the conversation with, someone was saying to me, I think you need to get better at actually saying to them, I'm not responding right now. And I'm like, I could fill my days actually telling people I'm not responding to them.
That's right. Well, I want people to check out your website, highperformancemindfulness.com.au, because you do this incredible work in schools, in the corporate world, for individuals. I know what you're doing, Em, is so important. It absolutely changed my life, and I use the tools that you gave me pretty much daily, almost, and I quote you all the time. I always say, Emma Murray says. So thanks so much.
So I'm so proud of you, Joe. Broad radio was something you used to talk about, and here I am finally on as a guest, and I'm super proud of you. You should be super proud of yourself. It's incredible what you're doing.
Thanks, Em. Highperformancemindfulness.com.au is the website. Emma Murray is the woman. She's amazing. Thanks so much for the chat, Em. You have a great day.
There you go.
Thanks,
you too. Bye.
In your arena, there's only one race to win. Your own. You never stop, never quit, never look back. You push and test your limits until there are none left. Fuel your performance with INC Dynamic Way to keep you going.
Broad Radio. Talking inspo we love, info we need, and sharing more of us. Watch and listen live every Tuesday 9 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time at broadradio.com.au or find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube and LinkedIn at Broad Radio Oz. Talk to us live. Call on 1300 8 Broad. Catch up on demand anytime, anywhere, every time, everywhere. On the train, we'll be here. 2 a.m. existential crisis? We've got you covered. Broad Radio. Here for more.
Well, Serpil, I do love it when a theme emerges in our show, which I feel has sort of happened today. We've just spoken with Em about resilience and sort of just acceptance, managing the struggle of life. And I think that conversation might continue with our next guest. She is someone that I'm equally a fan of, a writer, singer, musician, broadcaster. Her latest book, Childless, A Story of Freedom and Longing, is out now. And I'm really pleased to welcome her, Dr. Sian Prior. Hi.
Hello, lovely to be here.
Sian, you are one of the writers that I read where I go, I reckon I'd be friends with her. I really do feel that. It was sort of, you're writing around turning.
My work here is done.
Well, I mean, I'm sure that's every writer's goal, is to make the reader want to be your best friend or feel like they already are, perhaps. Is it because, though, that you share such incredibly beautiful personal parts of yourself, and is that why you share it, because you're hoping people like myself feel less alone?
Yes. Everything your beautiful last guest Emma said, I would just felt like cheering, because her conversation about vulnerability and admitting you're not perfect and kind of wrangling the inner critic, that's my bag as well. That's been my sort of lifelong struggle, I guess. And I know I'm not Robinson Crusoe in any of that. And and look, to be honest, sometimes I regret it. I have these deep moments of panic about oversharing in my books and my articles, and I think, people are going to think I'm an idiot, and I feel shame, and I feel like I've been self-pitying in public, and then I just have to talk myself down from those fears, because they are very old fears and they're very familiar probably to many of us, and remind myself that people do often contact me having read either of my memoirs and actually say, oh my God, you just wrote a book about me. And that's exactly what you want.
And in your new book, you wrote about being childless. Was that something where you thought, oh, this could be tricky, putting myself out there, talking about being childless?
It's a really interesting question, Serpil. What I thought and knew would be tricky was doing the writing, because I knew that it would be, I would be forced to re-immerse myself in some really, really painful, grief-stricken moments in my life. And part of me was like, why would I want to do that? But I also knew that it was a process I wanted to go through. And for me, processing stuff happens best when I write about it. If I'm just trying to think things through, I get a bit overwhelmed with all of those feelings that Emma was talking about. When I write, I have to focus, and I have to ask myself the hard questions and see things in a fresh light. And as for the kind of then putting it out in public, I think because I'd had such a generally positive response to the book about shyness and social anxiety, I just had to keep saying to myself, it's okay, people are kind. People are kinder than we fear, and people are grateful to see other people's vulnerability.
It is a topic, though, that is incredibly personal and painful, but also weirdly political in that everyone thinks they can have an opinion about women who are childless.
They sure do, and I think they have done for centuries. and sometimes I wonder if there's something terribly frightening about women who are childless, whether there's something that goes against what we've been taught to think of as natural, and therefore there's something unnatural about women without children, and anything unnatural is potentially a bit dangerous. And you think about the language around women without children, words like barren. I can't believe a word like barren still exists in the vocabulary in 2022, but our own former first female Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, who does not have children for reasons that are none of anyone's business except hers, she copped the most terrible vitriol and raging anger that often was focused on the fact that she was childless, and she was kind of, it was implied that she was almost a sociopath because she didn't have children, and words like, witch is ditch the witch, and words like crone, and, all of that stuff that's embedded in our language tells us so much about, what we fear and what we don't understand. And I guess that was also part of my aim in writing this second memoir about childlessness, was to try and help people understand what people like me have experienced and how hard it can be if you do want children and for a myriad of different reasons are unable to have them. I've been accused of choosing to be a career woman over having children, and it's like I'm like, I don't even know where to start with explaining to you how wrong that is.
Sian, you're so absolutely right. I mean, about Julia Gillard, I remember really vividly how she was referred to as being deliberately barren at one stage, and the subtext, of course, was, what would she know? What would she understand about making, policies around families? And I'm finding this conversation a little bit uncomfortable and triggering because, like you, I'm also childless, and I had a bit of a traumatic, tearful, journey of it all, and ended up with no children. So in my experience, being childless has meant, sort of being othered in a different way. So I've been othered throughout my life for other reasons, like, I've got an unusual name, for my ethnicity, for simply being a woman, for my religious background. And then what was a real slap in the face, a kick in the guts, was being othered for being childless by other women. Assumptions around, can we trust her to babysit? Should we even invite her? She'll be bored at the kids' party. Will she even want to do this? People would make decisions on your behalf. And I found that really, really upsetting. Well, what was your experience like?
Yeah, exactly that. And I'm sorry that you have, by the sound of it, had some similar experiences. And I am deeply conscious that my book and this topic can be incredibly triggering and difficult for women to talk about, but part of me just thinks I've got to push through. I've got to keep finding a way to have these conversations in public. But yeah, I try to be gracious in my assumptions about why people jump to conclusions about me. I wasn't invited to the birthday parties either, and even from people who knew in great detail the kind of journey I'd been through desperately trying to have kids. And I have tried to say to myself, well, maybe they think it will be too painful for me to see others having what I can't have. But it's not their choice to make, in a way. You know, it's my choice to make that decision. And unless we have the conversations and stop just jumping to conclusions, then people are going to continue to be hurt and to feel excluded and to feel othered. So yeah, it's and those stereotypes are ridiculous. You know, I had this experience, which I've written about in the book, of many, many years ago, going on a trip to the snow with some people, and there was a person there who I'd only just met, and I happened to be up on a mezzanine and, looking for something, and they continued talking downstairs, but of course I could hear them. And this person said, I'm really surprised I like Sian. I usually find childless women so selfish.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
What a thing to say.
It's so weird because, of course, part of me is like, oh, she likes me. But the much bigger part of me is like, because I'm childless, people are assuming that I am selfish. And yeah, Serpil, I so feel what you said about it's like adding insult to injury. On the one hand, we have endured, often these really grueling, absolutely heartbreaking experiences, and then to have someone come along and say something mean about you as a result of those terrible experiences, it just, it's gobsmackingly unfair.
I mean, people like that are just flat out dumb, right? That's stupidity, okay? That's the first thing I would say to that. But the second thing I would say, and mean and stupid, which is not a great combination in someone. No. But the other thing I would say is people are, in general, very bad at the discomfort of grief. They're very bad at feeling as though I'm going to have to sit with the fact that you've gone through something very painful and still are probably carrying that in you, and I might make it worse, and I don't know what to say, and I'm really, it's just easy not to have them there, rather than the kindness of including people that you love in your life. That's what it is, right?
That's absolutely what it is. And I myself have been guilty both of failing to deal with the grief of people close to me and of feeling that sense of like, I don't know what to do or say. And I've also been guilty of not allowing myself to experience and acknowledge grief. And that's another part of, I guess, the project and the revelation of writing a book about childlessness is I looked back and I thought I was so busy just trying to think of the next solution to this problem that I never paused to say to myself, man, this is hard. This is hard and heartbreaking, and I am so very sad about what's happening here, and angry. I was really angry I was angry with my body. I was angry with the medical profession. I was angry with the men with whom I tried to have children. And, again, as beautiful Emma Murray said, quite often I was so busy looking ahead that I didn't allow myself to sit in that moment and say, sad, angry, terrible place to be, but this is the place I am in, and I need to kind of honour that. So yeah, writing about it was a form of therapy for me of finally saying, oh yeah, that was really terrible. Poor me, looking back and having compassion for my earlier self, really.
Sian, I wrote a little letter. It was someone's bright idea, which was beautiful. They said, just pour all your feelings into a letter and then torch it, watch it burn. And it was really cathartic. And I just loved that ritual. I was like, oh, yeah, it's just melted away. So I understand how, writing a whole book would have been totally, useful for you. But
I'm
I
not
want
going
to
to
take
burn
the
Don't burn it. No.
don't burn it, don't burn it. I do want to
It's
take
my
the conversation
baby.
in a slightly different direction, though, because I like to think of myself as a bit of a diversity and inclusion champion. And when we're talking around women's equity and you know, women's equality, often the conversations are framed around gender inequity initiatives that are tied into motherhood, and women like you and I often sit on the sidelines. We're not part of the conversation. And I felt that in previous roles where, you know, I was put on radio shifts that no one else wanted to do because they had families, and they were like, oh, she doesn't have a family, put her on the horrible shift. And that conversation wasn't ever around, oh, well, she's already grieving about not being childless, and then she's almost being punished for not having children and doing these shifts that no one else wants to do. So is it time that we sort of looked at childless women as part of that inclusivity conversation when we're having these conversations about the workplace and other areas of our life as well?
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And, you know, I have quite a lot of close friends who are childless. I guess we gravitated towards each other because of what we had in common and because we have time for each other. You know, we have time that for other women is taken up by looking after their kids. And all of those friends of mine without children are the ones working so very hard, doing all the overtime, allowing people with families to take the best leave, you know, and them doing the, you know, the crappy days and the crappy hours because, yeah, they don't have children. And, you know, all of that language, the language of politics, and certainly in the last couple of decades has been so much about working families, you know, that phrase that became so popular. And every time I hear that phrase, I feel left out. And I think, you know, there's got to be a catch up here because statistically people like me are on the increase. People who are without children, perhaps living alone, perhaps single, and we are, it's like we're invisible when it comes to, as you say, that sort of consideration of policy and, you know, government largesse and people, you know, some people would say, well, you know, you're lucky you don't have to spend money on children and school fees and, you know, you've got all this freedom. And I do acknowledge that, you know, that's one of the reasons why my book is called Childless, A Story of Freedom and Longing, she says, checking the title. Get the order right. The order is very important. And you know, and that is something that I have tried to do. You know, I really don't want to sit here and say, oh, poor me for half an hour. I also want to acknowledge that part of my attempt to deal with this sadness in a more resilient way was to say, okay, well, what can I have as a result of not having the thing I'm most wanted in my life? And what I can have is an incredible amount of freedom. And so I write about, you know, turning 50 and getting myself a little camper van and starting to travel 3 months of the year in the little camper van and just actually embracing the fact that I could just go and see all the beautiful places and not be at home taking kids to, you know, soccer training or whatever it is. I seem to have strayed away from what the original question was. But, yeah.
Well, I would like to say I think there's a real missed opportunity often in the narrative around embracing childless women as the aunties and the best girlfriends and the community that I have. You know, I've only got one daughter, and there's a narrative for me around that because I wasn't able to have a second, and I had her pram in our roof, and I would go and visit the pram for like 9 years. I did not let go of that pram, and I'd just go and sit with that pram, hoping that there would be another baby in that pram. But so for her, I've made it that she's an only child, and she has lots of people around her, and I have childless friends, my sister-in-law particularly, and her relationship with my daughter is precious. And I just think there's a missed opportunity in this community of women and saying, you know what, please be a part of our lives, be a part of our family. It's different and it needs to be different because children need relationships with women who aren't their mothers. It's so blessed, that kind of relationship.
Yeah, and women who are mothers, for reasons that I guess are a whole other conversation we could have, are often doing it incredibly tough at the moment. You know, there's not enough childcare. You know, they're being punished professionally if they take time out to look after children. You know, the expectations of all the things they're meant to give their children just get higher and higher and higher and higher. So sometimes I do look at other mothers and think, oh my goodness, that just looks almost impossible what you're being expected to do these days. So yeah, let us help those of us who want to. Not everyone who's childless will want to do that. For some people it will remain so painful for so long that they will feel their only choice is not to spend time with children. And I totally understand and I totally respect that. But, you know, I've done a lot of offering over the years, a lot of offering to babysit, and it's very rarely been taken up. And I have, you know, felt very confused about that and wondered whether, Serpil, as you said earlier, whether it's that we're not quite trusted to have the skills to look after kids.
I'm not saying that as far as please come and help. I'm saying that as far as I just think there's blessed relationships with senior women and children that is overlooked.
I agree, Jo. I'd like to think I'm the best auntie in the world, and I love goofing around with children. I literally just love seeing their tiny minds come up with the most outrageous things where I think that is hilarious. You just make me laugh. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, my husband had a milestone birthday and I spent a huge chunk of that time doing karaoke with an 11-year-old and it was glorious. Like, I just loved that experience.
But I think that children can learn from women, whether their mothers, aunts, friends. I don't know. I don't know if that's I actually don't even know if that's an insensitive thing for me to say, but I feel like we're missing that sense of community.
It takes a village. I totally agree, because, I mean, the other thing that's often thought of is if you're childless, you know, like, again, going back to what would you know, but if we're all problem solvers, right? We problem solve in our days all the time. So if a mother is stressed in a particular situation and doesn't know how to problem solve some issue around their teenager, a childless friend or an aunt could step in and completely look at it from a new lens and say, have you tried X, Y, and Z? Because guess what? We've all been children at some point. We've all lived within families and grew up with siblings at some point, or cousins at some point if we're an only child, as in Willow. So it's not like we live in isolated bubbles. We haven't had a lobotomy. We are fully functioning members of society who can troubleshoot and problem solve.
Yeah.
I've been an auntie and you know, absolutely loved that. And my sister's been incredibly generous in encouraging me to have time with my nephew, and I'll be forever grateful, and I will forever adore that child, and that will be probably the closest I'll ever come to having a child of my own.
We're running out of time as always, but I need to acknowledge your beautiful writing course, which if I had the time, I would do this. My gosh, Sian, I love it. It's writing as therapy, which you can do if we head along to your website, sianprior.com. We're talking about resilience a lot today. What is it about writing that is therapy? I'm a mad journaler, by the way, so I couldn't survive without my writing as therapy.
Well, so you probably already know, Jo, exactly what it's about. It's about having a conversation with ourselves on the page in a way, and we will often find that we have knowledge and understandings hidden away in there that can really help us if we allow that knowledge to come out on the page. So we do things like we talk about this idea of the dialogical self, where we literally name different versions of ourselves and we write conversations between those different versions of ourselves. And the number of times people, look up from the page and go, oh my God, that was amazing. I had no idea that would come out, but that is very illuminating. So, and it's all online, so it's very easy, and you can do it in the safety and comfort of your own home. And yeah, I just love it. I just love watching those kind of light bulb moments on people's faces when they take the time to do the writing and find out all the things that they know.
It can be very emotional though, so I'm glad that people are doing it in the comfort of their home. I don't know if I would be courageous enough to do it in a room with other people.
No, and you don't have to share. You don't have to share anything that you write.
Yes.
It's all for yourself.
Right, like no one's going to read it. That's what I always say. Right. Yes.
And then burn it.
And then perhaps burn it. Maybe photocopy it and then burn it. Would it still have the power if you know you've kept a copy?
No, you just don't keep it. You just burn it. You've dealt with those feelings.
Or delete.
letting go. My goodness. Sian, thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations on the book, your second memoir. I love that you've written it. I think it's really, really important.
Thank you so much, guys.
You have a great day.
Thanks, Sian.
Wow, beautiful conversation. How does it feel for you having that conversation, Serpil?
Oh, look, I got a little bit emotional. It brings up feelings for me, but I think I'm largely at peace with where I'm at life. I struggled with it for a while. It was difficult, but I think I can be a great auntie, like I said. I can be, a great extended auntie for all my friends' children. Plus also, I want to travel the world. Once this COVID business is done and dusted, I want to just grab my backpack and just...
You're out of here.
I'm out of here.
Yeah. I'm very envious of Sian's camper vanning, because
it's brilliant.
She just goes to the beach and just, stays there and spends time just pondering life and taking in the sea and the sun. And I'm like, I've jotted that down for when I'm 70. Or maybe 60.
Grey nomad.
I totally will be.
Goals.
I totally will be. And it speaks to what you were talking about earlier around this the attention economy, and how our attention is totally taken up by all of this information that's bombarding us. I can't wait for that time where I go, not today.
Just you and the beach.
It's me and the beach and the sunshine in my camper van.
Yeah.
How delightful.
I know. And a yoga mat?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. A dog.
A dog.
And a dog.
Then the dog will demand your attention, though.
Maybe I'm addicted to dependence. That is true. It defines my life.
You need to go cold turkey.
Yeah. Serpil, thanks so much for joining us again on Broad Radio. And we'll be back next Tuesday. We'll see you then.
When the beat's gone, you can't save me. Now we don't dance like we used to. Silent disco on the floor, baby. Mr. DJ, you get me through. When the beat's gone, you can't save me. Under those lights, you turn it on right. You're on fire, baby. Still drinking too much has got you